that. Hello, Linda.
Oh, hi, Lerzan, and hi, Linda. We're all here now, I think, right?
All right, let's let the games begin.
So welcome to all of you, and to anybody who watches the video in due course. I think our habit is that we've been introducing ourselves very briefly, and then the floor is open to anybody, to anything, and every 2 minutes, James will turn over the egg timer, so we know where we're running. And I'm Jim Stoner, and welcome. I'm delighted to see all of you. So go right ahead and introduce yourselves and whatever you want to do.
I'll jump in. Hi, I'm Roger Sorkin. I'm the director of the American Resilience Project. We're a mission-driven nonprofit, and we make documentary films, mostly for now, but what we'd like to be able to do is expand to creating educational toolkits and other communications tools so that we can really create fundamental change in society. We don't seek the creation of film as a measure of our success. It's just one of the tools that we use. What we're really trying to do is change culture, influence public policy. And, I think at the heart of what our work is designed to do is really encourage civic participation, build trust in society, rebuild trust across institutions. And I'm of the firm belief that having a strong narrative, sometimes what I call a strategic narrative, is the foundation upon which all other change can be made.
I'll pick up on that. Thanks, Roger. I'm Sandra Waddock. I'm a professor at Boston College, the Galligan Chair of Strategy there. And I am working with a couple of initiatives, one called the SDG Transformations Forum and another called Bounce, an initiative that came out of that called Bounce Beyond, that is, both are attempting to figure out what we're calling next economies, but really changed world for the better look like, and how we can work to bring them about.
Perfect. I'll go from there. Hi, everybody. Stuart Hart. I guess itinerant academic would be the best label. I've been around the last 30 years or so. I was at Michigan, I was at UNC, I was at Cornell, and most recently at the University of Vermont, where we have created this new MBA program called the Sustainable Innovation MBA, which is a redesign from the ground up, not tacking on some elective courses in the second year. And I also have a little nonprofit called Enterprise for a Sustainable World, where we work directly with companies on sustainable innovation, sort of regenerative technology and inclusive base of the pyramid business, and was also the founder of the Base of the Pyramid Global Network, which is about 40 groups around the world that are focused on inclusive and sustainable business development.
Thank you.
Sophia, we can't hear you.
Ed, hi, Ed.
Hi, Jim. How are you?
I'm fine, and you?
I'm fine. Interested in what is coming out here in this dialogue that you've started. I got in at 10 o'clock and you were already very busy. Did I come in late? Did it start earlier?
No, we just started a moment ago. We did a 10-minute warm up to get our various computers working. Most of all, getting my computer working, but we're just starting officially right now. And
okay.
We're giving a very short introduction to themselves, and then we're going to talk about whatever we talk about.
Well, do you want me to make a quick introduction?
Okay.
Yes, go for it.
Well, Ed Schein, I'm retired from Sloan School of Management, where I was a organizational psychologist for most of my career. My current interest has turned from how do we get from international competition, which is an extension of the economics and politics of internal organizational competition. How do we get from competition to collaboration? Because I do not see how the world's countries are going to work together to solve the global warming problem unless we develop some kind of a global consciousness of collaboration. And I think if we social scientists don't don't do that and help, it might not happen and we'll all die.
Thank you. Lerzan?
Sure. Hi, Lerzan Aksoy. I'm an associate dean of the undergraduate program and strategic initiatives here at Fordham's Gabelli School of Business. I'm also a faculty member in the marketing area. A lot of the things that I do here at the Gabelli School in terms of my role as an administrator, I oversee many of the initiatives that are aimed at helping educate the future leaders and make them the change makers and leaders who are going to make a better world for us. So I've been thinking a lot and doing a lot at the Gabelli School to really move that forward. Most recently, we launched the Responsible Business Coalition at the Gabelli School of Business. And it is a hub where we bring together modern business leaders, specifically in various industries, starting with fashion. And we convene them. We have 44 CEOs right now in the fashion space that get together at the Gabelli School and specifically to discuss issues related to sustainability and responsible business and determine an action agenda. And those themes are then fed into our curriculum in terms of projects for students and faculty. So there's this sort of loop where we're sort of melding the two worlds of business and also academia.
Thank you. Charlie, I think I saw your hand just as I said Lerzan's name.
Yeah, I'm Charlie Wankel, and I'm at St. John's University in New York City. And I'm teaching managing for sustainability in the spring. I'm very big on the Aim to Flourish endeavor, especially the less addressed SDGs, to have students network with executives who are interested in sustainability through it as a service learning project. Good to be here.
Thank you. Linda?
Hi there. I'm Linda Irwin, and I am founder of a consulting firm that I've operated for a couple of decades now. And I also teach at the Anderson College of Business at Regis University and have developed a number of courses there. I've been enjoying the intersection of the client work, the business world and what they're looking at, and the students and what they're looking at, and have developed, specifically I've been working in entrepreneurship and strategy and marketing. And what I've seen is in both the business side and the academic side, at least from the students' point of view, there's a real need there's a great interest in sustainability. There's a great passion for implementing it, but there's the rub. Both businesses and people in the academic world are looking for the recipes. They're looking for the guidebook to see, okay, we believe now, how do we do this? And so that is kind of my new area of interest, bringing those how-tos together.
Thank you. Sophia?
Hi, I'm Sophia Town. I'm an assistant professor at Fordham University, and my main focus is really leadership and human flourishing. So how can we reframe, re-articulate the way that leadership is really understood more broadly in the public, sort of the public narrative, what it means to be a leader. How can we reframe that so that human virtues like mindfulness and compassion and an awareness of interdependence and all of these necessary things are not really perceived as virtues, but perceived as fundamental to leadership. And so at Fordham, that's in my research and in my teaching. At Fordham, I was recently part of a redesign team, and we redesigned our core management class, which is a core course for our sophomores, and shifted this class from kind of your standard way that management is taught toward a more intentional focus on sustainability and these virtues that I was talking about, Jesuit values too. So yeah, that's what I'm about.
Thank you. Now I'll try and be quiet for a few moments, although I'm bursting to say things. And so somebody else kick it off.
I love the leadership focus. I think, I mean, while Sophia, it's formal for your work, it seems to me that all of us are somehow engaged with making sure that a term that I've recently come upon is this concept of adaptive leadership. One of the advisors to our nonprofit happens to be Eric Martin. Not sure, Sophia, maybe you've come across his work. He recently just wrote a book called Your Leadership Moment. And I've just been reading it, so it's been a lot on my mind. And I don't necessarily use the terms when I'm creating my work or when I'm talking to an audience, but what I try to do is give people the tools to be better communicators. And in effect, I think they become leaders in their communities. I'll often, sort of part of my shtick is to say, don't shy away from talking about politics at Thanksgiving dinner. Just make sure you do it the right way, because there's always a way to do it. You just have to do your homework, and you have to be mindful. You have to know where your audiences are coming from. You have to, you need empathy. You need to understand almost the ethnographic method of how do you acknowledge your own biases before you engage with someone that might be from another tribe or culture or walk of life, county, state. I mean, whatever we decide that grouping to be. It's nice to hear us talking, speaking the same language using different vocabulary terms.
Sandra?
I just want to pick up on that because my students next week are presenting 5-minute TED Talks called My Leadership Moment. So nice synchronicity there. And this course sort of exemplifies some of what I've been thinking about, which is it moves from sort of the individual sort of self-awareness and thinking about leadership and emotional intelligence and those kinds of things towards a real systems view and really trying to expose the students to the reality that our world is in bad shape and that our systems, the economic systems we've created and the production systems that we've created are, and the human systems that we've created are in no small measure responsible for those problems. And so how do we begin to think about ourselves, each one of us, as change agents? So let me just leave it there and let someone else pick it up.
So I have a question. What do people think that the past year, this year of COVID that we've been living through serves to just kind of dig deeper and retrench coming out of it? Or does it represent a real inflection point where there actually is an opening, as Kurt Lewin would say, you have to unfreeze before you can change. Is it an unfreeze event? Or do we just refreeze and actually retrench in a worse position than we were before?
Could I take a crack at that? What if we start with this problem that the sustainability issue is international competition between big countries who are all about themselves? What I think is interesting about the COVID is that it serves as a kind of common enemy that forces people who normally would compete to begin to collaborate. And we see this very unevenly. We share scientific data about the COVID, and we claim we will share the remedial and the curative things, but you can see that it's only really working at the level of the hospital or maybe at the level of the state. It's not even working at the level of the US, where we have competition between states and competition between the central government and the rest of us. Really pathetic examples of how selfish competition has kind of become the norm. And yet in COVID, the incredible degree of collaboration that the doctors and the nurses and the administrators have displayed in these hospitals and in the communities where people who normally are strangers to each other are now helping each other, but we often see when there are real crises. So the ability to be collaborative is in us. As humans, we are capable of collaborating, but our tribalism has, and our politics and our economic theories all argue that the best way to motivate and the best way to succeed is to compete. And so even inside our organizations, we compete for the next promotion and don't somehow seem to understand that what will prevent the world from frying with heat is how to convert the competitive side of ourselves into a what some people would say a heart at peace rather than a heart at war. A heart that is looking for working with people rather than a heart that is out to do what's best for myself. How to make that conscious leap into the international scene, not just to do it inside the US, not just to do it inside our business establishment, but what can we do to help the world become more worldly is to me a huge problem, which is a consciousness issue, but we have to go beyond local consciousness into global consciousness. And so I look for scientists, artists, occupations that already do that. There are lots of occupations in science that think globally. Wouldn't occur to them not to share data. It's happening in medicine. And so my eagerness is to find more examples of global consciousness that goes beyond country tribal borders.
Do you think, Ed, that what's the relationship between competition and collaboration and time frame? Because I think either a parallel or a related construct is short-term versus long-term thinking, and it would seem that those two, in some ways, go together.
Well, the short answer to that is, are we excuse me, are we aware that the US culture is a short-term culture? And that China, for example, is a long-term culture. And so we have to accept the fact that our way is not the best way by a long shot. You could see the US culture as being a very immature adolescent culture that hasn't yet learned how to think in terms of larger human global terms. So yes, short run, long run is a key issue, provided we recognize that we're somehow got hooked on short run through our own history and our ability to do things fast, and that in itself may be a global problem. Mm-hmm. We may be the biggest problem in sustainability, that our way of doing things may be the most dysfunctional. That would be a horrible thing to have to realize, but it's possible that even with the COVID, the way it has evolved and the way our culture and our government has dealt with it has put us behind the rest of the world in dealing with some of these issues.
Yep.
Sandra, and then Linda. Oh, Linda, go ahead, Linda.
I was just going to ask, picking up on that point, do you see culture as being aligned with nations or with tribes within nations?
Every group with a history has a culture. The problem is that it becomes competitive at the tribal level, because somehow when there's so many people in the world, we can't all have everything. So inevitably we end up in tribes of various sizes. And the trouble with countries is they have different languages and different cultures, it makes it easier to be self-centered. It's much harder to be multilingual and multicultural at that level. And that's why I think medicine and science and some of these groups that have a common language across countries is the thing we have to look at and see how do they do it? How do scientists talk to each other and not compete? Although there's evidence that even there, the tribal pressures are strong. Somebody told me that there may be a Chinese vaccine already being used that we don't know about. I don't know what the facts are, but it could be that even with all the evidence of the COVID that we have to work together, there are already tribes pulling away into their own self-centeredness, which is good short-run thinking, but will be a disaster for humanity.
Sandra?
Yeah, I want to go back to Stu's original question. So it seems to me what we're experiencing, we live in these complex adaptive systems, and they have a lot of wicked problems in them. And COVID is one example of those wicked problems. Sustainability is another. And so the nature of complex systems is that once you start a process in motion, you can't actually go back to the way it used to be. So while I think there is a lot of forces at play, political forces in particular, that would love to bring us back to what was, that's just not going to be feasible. Now I think they will try their mightiest to bring us back to as much as possible of what was, but many things will have changed. And including, I think, some people's mindset. So some of this initiative Bounce Beyond that I'm working on is basically going from the premise that this disaster that we're now still facing, is an opportunity to bring about what we're calling next economies or new economics, new ways of thinking, drawing on the idea from Dunhill and Meadows that mindset change is the most powerful lever of change. And so if we can see this as an opportunity, we have a possibility, I think, to intervene now. And Jim, I see that's exactly what you're trying to do with this series, is to get people thinking differently.
Sophia?
So kind of going back to what Ed was saying about language, and then also Sandra, what you were saying about mindset, I think where academics can come in and have a really powerful impact potentially is changing the language that we have to describe what's going on, creating a new vocabulary for talking about what's happening, talking about these complex systems. You know, people think through the language that we have available to us. We think in metaphor. And so, and in the US, we live in this very Western individualized culture, and we have this particular set of language, particularly in the English language, that metaphorizes the world in a certain way, and we live into that, right? And so I feel almost like in order to see some massive change socially, we need a new way to talk about what's going on so that people kind of we can pivot our culture, pivot ourselves out of this one model that we're so entrenched in. And actually I was gonna ask Roger, since you deal with communication as well, if you had any response to that, if you think that that seems like something feasible to do as academics, or might that be a pipe dream?
Well, I certainly don't think it's a pipe dream. I mean, I come to my work through the lens of basic human need. And so the stories that I generally take on, I came to this work frustrated with the way climate had become a politicized and polarizing issue. I think the messenger is a big part of that. With all due respect to Al Gore, I don't think he was the best messenger, just simply because of his identity as, if you will, the tribal leader of a political faction. I don't think he intended it to be as such, but what I set out to do was then try to find messengers that would not immediately send people to their respective camps. And so I came upon the military talking about climate change as a threat multiplier. It's about 10 years ago now. They wrote that phrase into the Quadrennial Defense Review of 2010. Climate change is a threat multiplier. When I read those two words, I had almost a visceral response to it, and the light bulb went off, and I thought that's the way to frame this discussion. And really what that goes to, it circles back to this concept of basic human needs. So in the back of my mind, as sort of an academic exercise, my own internal academic exercise, I don't really talk about this much in front of audiences, but when I'm doing my work and thinking about how I'm going to persuade somebody to take down the temperature on this particular conversation or depoliticize it in some way, or get out of their tribal camps on this one, I think about what might Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson say to attack this film? And what might my response be to that? And my response, almost always when I play this game in my mind, I've not had the privilege of being attacked by those two gentlemen. I hope to get on their radar screen because it means I'd be making some more progress. I would say, are you against saving lives and money? And really just keep coming back to that one defense, because I think that's the prism through which people can be reached and inspired. And it's, for me, it's a healthy blend, what I consider a healthy blend of optimism and cynicism, in that if you can't convince people that it's in their own self-interest to take action, they won't take action. But I'm optimistic in the sense that they will, as long as we can reframe the discussion on those terms, which I don't see as a difficult thing to do if we do the work, put in the work to do it. I think that there's great potential. And it means when we talk to the environmental community, stop talking about polar bears. It's not something that people can relate to in their daily lives. I feel for them, many people feel for them, but the people that we're trying to persuade, they don't feel for them, and you have to accept that. And so I think people care about their families and their homes. And the more we can put our perspectives, our words into those perspectives, I think the more successful we'll be.
Charlie.
I missed the military metaphor that he used. That seemed very important to me, but I missed the words.
Yeah, I mean, I talk about it in terms of saving. Oh, the military used the phrase threat multiplier. They were describing climate change as a threat multiplier.
A threat multiplier.
And another military metaphor that I'll often use is blood and treasure. That's another way of saying families, lives, basic human need.
Lerzan, Charlie?
Oh, I was just going to say that I think, language and the way that Roger, you said framing. I just put a couple of resources into the chat. There's a whole series of sort of framing social issues that the Stanford Social Innovation Review has put forth. But I think it's really critical how you actually communicate it, the language you use, but also how you frame the problem in getting people's attention.
There's a really good book on influencing people by Jason Jay and Gabriel Grant that you all may have come across. And it used to be, it was almost called Beyond the Choir, and I forget the title of it now, but it's really about having effective conversation with people who have a very different viewpoint than you have. I'll put it into, I'll send a note to you all about it in case anybody's interested. Charlie, I interrupted you.
Well, picking up on self-interest, I try to have students come to understand how getting sustainability creds is a way for them to find jobs more easily, since this is an area that companies are trying to integrate into their fiber more. Having you as a job seeker show how you can contribute to their sustainability efforts is becoming more important for them.
Stu.
I can build on that one, and put forward a proposition that, Roger, I think I like the threat multiplier metaphor. And I think another threat multiplier that has, been a, an omnipresent institution for the last 30 or 40 years has been the American style business school that purports shareholder primacy and market fundamentalism. It's sort of the business arm of neoliberalism. And I guess I would put forward that probably has been one of the biggest threat multipliers that created the mess we're in. And that unless or until we can figure out how we transform that, I don't see how we get out of this.
If you want to go for an example of going from long-term thinking to short-term thinking, I think about what's happened in finance, where the attempt to maximize shareholder wealth in the long run has really boiled itself down to today's share price through a series of incredible weird thinking that convinces people that that's how they can best prepare for the long term, is basically today's share price. It's crazy.
Efficient markets and agency theory.
Yep.
So part of the jobs issue that you put forward has to do with what's the real purpose and aim of business schools? Is it to train people in the skills and the tools to perpetuate the status quo? Or is it to prepare them for the world to come?
And I think that's a shift we're starting to struggle with right now, fundamentally and deeply. And the students are telling us we have to do that, I think. Roger, you had your hand up?
Yeah, one thing I didn't mention in my bio, which is that I'm fairly new to the Fordham orbit, and it's really an honor for me. Lerzan has just recently invited me to be a part of the Responsible Business Coalition, and I eagerly jumped at the chance. This comes after almost about a year now that I've been assisting in the teaching of a couple of classes with David Gauci, I assume most, if not all of you know. And it's funny for me because being in a business school is really the last place I thought someone with my background, skill set, and capacity for learning would be. I'm not really a spreadsheet finance and numbers guy. As much as I've tried to read the third section of the Wall Street Journal over the years, I tend to see my eyes glaze over, and I've come to accept that that's okay. But I'm really heartened that I can be part of this conversation in that it's indicative of the fact that business leaders or business academics are beginning to think outside of the construct of the past. And what I've been bringing to David's classes is an understanding of the communication portion and defining sustainability in business terms, and using phrases like doing well by doing good, and pointing people back to the Sustainable Development Goals. So I don't mean to compliment myself, but I think just the fact that someone like me has been invited into a business school orbit is evidence of the fact that there is growth and there is evolution within, I guess, the business curriculum. So I'm pleased and honored and humbled to be a part of it. But I think more of folks like me being part of the business curriculum really needs to take off. And that includes behavioral psychologists and anthropologists and other folks in the social sciences.
I even know a business school that welcomed a mindfulness person onto its faculty officially very recently. Sophia?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. You know,
qualitative researcher too.
As important as all of what's just been said is, and I think it's very important because I think it's true that business schools over the last 30 years have come to incorporate, new perspectives. But, and Sandra knows what I'm about to say, the metaphor that I would use is that it's been in the form of a saddlebag, right? That ethics and sustainability and innovation tend to inhabit centers and elective courses in the second year of the MBA curriculum. They haven't made their way into the core, and the core really hasn't changed very much in 30 years. I've been teaching in the core course in business schools for 35 years, and I can say that it hasn't changed very much over that period of time. It's still the same core ideology. And until we shift that, we just have these really cool looking saddlebags hanging off the horse, but it's the same old horse.
Sandra, and then when Sandra's finished, Lerzan, do you want to talk about going after the core, which Stu's program obviously is done, and so are the other special advanced level programs in sustainability. But what you were working on, Sophia and others, is going right down to the core and changing the core. But Sandra, I interrupted you a moment ago. Go ahead.
I could only remember what I was going to say. No, I agree with Stu 100%. Economics is at the core, and the core memes of economics are the ones that various people, including Stu and Ed, pointed us to earlier. And until we change economics and the way it's framed, not just in business schools, but in broader society, I think we're not going to make the kind of transition that we need to make. We need, I'm working with this other organization called the Wellbeing Economics Alliance, and one of their agendas is to change the sort of narrative around economics. And I did just publish a paper in which I tried to offer some new memes, things like stewardship of the whole, rather than, I'm only out for myself, or in collaboration, as Ed would say, instead of competition. So I think we really need to be working at that level of the fundamental discipline to really shift the mindsets of people to get to the kind of transformation that is really needed in the world today. So I'll just stop there.
Lerzan, before I ask Sandra to send me that paper, which she's promised to do, I think, right, once it came out, and maybe you want to post it for everybody. Lerzan, these things come up directly in terms of the work you and others are doing right now, in terms of going right after the core, and the upcoming economics course that Jeff and Tony are going to present in this coming term. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Oh,
please,
sorry.
Ed, go ahead.
Hold up, go ahead, Lerzan.
Okay. So, I couldn't agree with you more. We really have to start right when the students come in. We can't even, and for us at the Gabelli School, that's the core courses start in sophomore year. So what we've done is just, in their first semester, the first business class that they take, which we call ground floor, is when we start talking about all of these issues. So it's when they're introduced into, what is the purpose of a business? What is the purpose of an organization? And so they start sort of thinking through about how, what are the roles of the various functions in that? So we've really integrated the UN Sustainable Development Goals, but also at a more sort of discipline level right off the bat when they're starting off in their first semester of their freshman year. But as you said, Stu, that is not enough. We have to integrate this into the core courses, including the liberal arts core, to Sandra's point, which is economics. So the Leading People Organizations area has really been a big innovator and driver of this effort. And this spring, we're actually offering an economics course that is about sort of the modern sustainable world and economics within that context. And it's being co-taught by Tony Annette, who was the speechwriter at IMF and who is at the Columbia part of the Earth Institute, and also Jeffrey Sachs, of course. They're co-teaching it in the spring. But in addition to that, like Sophia has been involved in this whole task force of the principles of management and the rehaul that's happened with that course. So they have integrated these issues and really transformed the curriculum to align with everything that we're talking about, and educating a different kind of leader, starting with the principles of management. Now, is it an easy process? No, it's not easy at all. And I'm sure in as many of your institutions, it's the faculty that feels the ownership of the curriculum. And so moving that needle takes some time, but what we've done is really identified some champions within each of the areas who are leading the way in that transformation. So, we've been sort of building on that. And then, of course, I think junior and senior year, you have to sort of continue that. But one thing that I did want to point out that is a challenge is the students' perception of this and of sort of what it means to go into a career in this space. And they see it as they frequently associate it with, working at a nonprofit, or, how do you create change and social change? It's about working at a nonprofit or working in a sustainability function in an organization. And we frequently hear from students that, we know the situation about how expensive colleges are in the United States. And so a lot of them have debt, and they have a lot of pressures from their families. And so we frequently hear about their fears of, taking any career track that isn't one that's going to be highly paid. And so I think that's another sort of issue or problem or challenge we have to tackle, and the misperception that comes with that. So.
Ed, go ahead.
A short story and a metaphor. When I started at Sloan, Douglas McGregor was my mentor, and he, of course, had a metaphor for humans. Humans can either be looked at as people who want to work and who want to contribute, and the job of the manager is to make it possible for them to do that. That was theory Y, or theory X. Humans are seen as cynical, lazy bums who really would prefer to lie on the beach. The current version of that I see in management theory is humans as just transactional and self-centered and competitive, and basically as objects, rather than others like me who are people with hearts and feelings and all sorts of things. And what I see the problem to be in business schools is that the human behavior courses teach the McGregor version. We talk about human needs and the totality of humans as not just objects, but in the marketing course, the economics course, the finance course, every other course portrays the subjects, the humans with whom that course deals, as transactional objects, as rational economic men, not as whole human beings. So the student comes out with 10% of our stuff and 90% of, yeah, but the world is a transactional world, and it's all well and good that there are some professors that think humans really are capable of more than that. But what I learn in all these other courses, not just economics, is to treat the human as an object. And that to me is a deep problem, which I now see even more clearly in Palo Alto, where I could do a lot of work with Stanford. And guess what? The business school is not interested in the kind of work I do. But Peter and I, and the book we've written called Humble Leadership, the place where people are interested in that and have Peter and me actually teaching this stuff is in the medical school and in the hospital. Medicine understands this, that humans are whole human beings. I don't think the theory of management, which dominates business schools, yet understands that humans are more than objects and rational economic people.
You know, Ed, to build on that, I think it's attributable to the wrong turn that the field of economics took about 120 years ago in the neoclassical direction. You know, because of course the theory of the rational man is much more easily modeled using calculus than the complex person that you describe. But it's certainly what the classical economists didn't view it that way, right? I mean, so I've for the last 4 or 5 years been trying to understand history a lot more. I'm working on this new book called The Next Capitalist Reformation. And to do that, you know, I've gone back and tried to read as much as I could about some of the original sources, including, of course, Adam Smith. And one of the things you realize rather quickly is that the use of the term self-interest by Adam Smith meant something entirely different than the neoclassical economists interpreted it to mean. It did not mean selfish. That's not what it meant at all. It meant a person steeped in virtue, that person's self-interest could only be served by behaving in a virtuous way, which means serving all of their relationships and stakeholders. That was what Adam Smith meant by it. And somehow we went on a detour, and it's time for that to end.
And Linda, and then Sandra, Linda.
I think this kind of comes full circle back to what we were talking about at the beginning with language. I see it in marketing where these new courses that I'm getting student feedback from, and for them to look at not sustainability saddlebags, although that is their inclination. They do want to have, they love it, but they don't see it integrated. And I keep pulling them back to, no, look, you have to analyze your customers. They want to analyze, they've been taught to analyze demographics and push products to customers. And we're flipping everything around saying, you have to understand the problems of the people. So that gets back to so many of the topics that we've talked about, which is the language has to be understandable across disciplines, and the disciplines have to interconnect so that we know when we're talking to, sometimes we just make assumptions about marketing, strategy, economics, right? And we assume that they are still stuck in the past. So we have an opportunity here to bring our disciplines together as well, if we can find a way to talk about these in common terms.
Sophia.
So one thing I think that would be really interesting to do, and I don't yet know how this would be possible, but to bring phenomenology to our students. I know that's a big fancy word that probably our sophomore students wouldn't have any interest in learning about, wouldn't know about, but one in particular, this idea of really grounding our theories in students' lived experience, experiential, first person, tangible, holistic essence, right, of what they're going through in their own lives, drawing from their own lives. And then also, I think it was Martin Buber, but I'm not positive, but pivoting from the I-it relationship, which is what many of our current theories do, to the I-thou relationship. How do we get our students to understand what they're learning theoretically about themselves and the world through this lens of I-thou? And so I don't know yet how to do that. I'm interested in doing that because I think that's really critical, but that would be a shift or a reframing that I think could be very powerful. But it's almost like an entirely different paradigm. So, yeah.
Oh, we've done a pretty good job of teaching the wrong stuff. Maybe we stop doing that. It'll be a step toward teaching the right stuff. Sandra?
Yeah, I mean, to go back to integrate what Sophia just said and what Stu talked about, this turn that was taken was quite deliberate. And this sort of neoliberal economics that we now have, and the memes that we're so familiar with, market fundamentalism and the selfish, self-interested actors, and that the market will solve all problems and laissez-faire government, all of those things were quite deliberately deployed and are still being quite deliberately deployed out in the world. Whereas another message, a different message, say, for instance, Kate Raworth's Donut Economics, which is fairly new, we don't have a unified voice behind that to send that narrative out, to change the paradigm. It is a paradigm shift, I think, that is desperately needed. And that's where mindset change comes in, and really rethinking and helping people to rethink how they view economics and how they view business in the world and what the purpose of business is. So very fundamental things need to be attacked in a sense, and questioned and reframed. And that's where something as powerful as what Roger is doing with videos, I think, is really important.
Thank you. Lerzan, you're involved in the new paradigm for Jesuit business education, the new narrative. Do you want to say something about that? Because I think it directly addresses what Sandra's talking and everybody's talking about right now.
Yes. So, exactly what you said, Sandra, this shifts from how we see the world, or how we have seen the world, and how we should actually be sort of rethinking that, has been the focus of a group of deans led by our dean at the Gabelli School, Donna Rapaccioli, and deans of several Jesuit schools, like Boston College, getting together and putting together. They started with a paradigm shift white paper. So what are some of the things that really need to be changing in business school education? And that's something that these deans across the world of these business schools are working on in terms of integrating. So really using the power of the collective to create this change.
And not only from my side are they suggesting a new narrative, a new paradigm, but what's exciting for me also is that there's like 11 working teams focused on the core courses in each field, finance, marketing, management, et cetera, which are both developing syllabi and new textbook goals or work on new textbooks, including that finance course will be work that you mentioned with Jeff Sachs and Tony Annette will be preparing a starting to work on a textbook in economics that's very, very different from what we teach in economics right now. So going down to bare metal and changing the core courses across the curriculum, I think a lot of us believe is an important step in what we're trying to do. Now, Roger?
Yeah, I wanted to propose something. This has to do with more of a in-classroom methodology, which is definitely not my area of expertise. But as we talk about the multidisciplinary approach to paradigm shift, I have been really intrigued at the power of drama and simulation. And when we talk about narrative, it's funny, I mean, I make documentaries, but I've always kept my eyes open to seize the opportunity to work on something dramatic. I've done a little bit of work with actors and mostly on dramatic educational and training videos over the years. But if I had had that fork in the road and I had the chance to go more towards drama, I would have heartily taken that path. And one thing that I have done, I did it with David Gauci in his class last spring or last winter, and I've done it on a couple of other occasions now, are role-playing and simulation exercises. One thing I did with the Association of Climate Change Officers at a forum that they held was I ran a simulated town hall, and we put a fictitious problem before the groups. We had there was about 60 participants. We had them all break up into groups of about 7. So we had about 8 or so groups. Each person in the group, there was a mayor in each group. There was a local chamber of commerce leader. There was a hydrologist. There was all of these people dealing with the common problem of we're going to raise a tax to help pay for a stormwater mitigation solution to flooding that we're having. So talking about climate change and environmental solutions to an immediate problem that's affecting everybody, their bottom lines, their homes, their businesses. And I found it to be just such an incredibly powerful exercise because not everybody had the communication skills. And certainly the people who had the role as, let's say, Chamber of Commerce representative had no idea what the city public works official cared about. And so it really gave people the tools to explore, as actors and dramatists might say, to play in the world of someone whose shoes they had never walked in. And to Sophia's framing around this concept of I and thou, which I love. I've not heard that put that way. I think that, and then of course this unpacks the thoughts around emotional intelligence. It's something that I would be pushing if given the chance, is to introduce perhaps the principles of drama therapy. I don't know enough about drama therapy to say, especially in an academic setting, what that would entail. But I think role-playing and simulation is a very important tool that can be brought into any curricula anywhere, especially as we think about interdisciplinary solutions.
I can't resist saying, Roger, that for a long time I've argued that the most important management skill is listening. And it also occurred to me that maybe the most important leadership type skill is improv as a manager.
Well, we actually, I'll give you a quick improv anecdote from one of these town halls. We had a couple of the people who didn't get chosen to be in the hot seat serve as disgruntled townsfolk. And we went around before the town hall started and we gave them provocative questions to ask. And a few of them ran with it and took it beyond a level that we had thought. And one of them became sort of this disruptive heckler. And I was there just sort of overseeing, but then the mayor, the person who was playing the mayor, turned to me and said, Sheriff, can you please take care of this person who won't settle down after they had tried to settle it down? And I realized that in the improv world, there's the catchphrase of yes, and. You're not supposed to shoot down something that your improv partner is saying. You're supposed to build on it. And so I had to say, okay, I'm the sheriff now because they just made me the sheriff. I had not thought that there would be a role for a sheriff. And that injected an entirely different dynamic into the situation. But to your point, James, improv is critical. And so it's sort of a nice corollary to the drama therapy. Perhaps there's a new field, burgeoning field called improv therapy.
Hey, can I make mention of one thing that?
4 minutes left, Stu.
Yeah, just one thing that's exactly on what Roger's been just talking about. And it's a little bit of a plug, but I'll do it anyway because people might have others who might be interested. We've developed over the past couple of years an online program, which includes, like, the guts of it is a simulation, a role play simulation of transforming a company over 20 years. It's called Leading the Sustainability Transformation. So there's a content platform, which is asynchronous, people can access, but then, you know, the actual play of the game is over 12 weeks, where some of it is asynchronous, but a lot of it is team-based. And you have a bunch of roles inside the company, but then there are community roles and environmental roles and government roles that, and all of those come together through numerous cycles where you get feedback, you know, and results. And then the outcome of the whole program is for each participant to develop their own back home innovation initiative. So it's just to Roger's point. And what we found is that, you know, the usual online course is a talking heads Coursera kind of thing with some readings and lectures. And yeah, we have a content platform around the idea of sustainable business, but the real guts of it and what makes it work is this role play based simulation. It's really, really important what you say.
Thank you. We're going to shut down exactly at, well, officially everybody's excused exactly at 1 o'clock, and anybody wants at 2 o'clock, anybody wants to stick around, will stick around for as long as you want to. Closing comments, Ed?
Very quick comment. What I'm thrilled about hearing is that experiential learning, which has always been at the core of sort of the behavioral organizational courses, at least at MIT it was with the Sloan Fellows and so on, that what I'm hearing is that in the younger generation teachers and younger people generally, this whole idea of moving away from transactional to the I-thou, moving away from teaching to learning and using experiential things is more natural now in other curricula, not just in the HR stuff, where it has always been in the last 50 years. And that I find is the most hopeful thing that I've heard in the last hour, is how experiential, which I think leads to the I-thou, is taking hold in more and more areas.
Thank you.
Can I just add one thing that's really been sticking in my mind here? I didn't want to throw it out there because it might be coming a little too much from left field. But when we talk about taking a long view and our inability, maybe as a culture, maybe as a species, to do that, I'm always struck, and I'll try not to inject any value judgments about this, but I'm struck at the successful long game that Republicans have played when it comes to remaking the judiciary. It still really blows my mind that 50, 60 years, they knew they wouldn't get the instant gratification. There would be no such thing as instant gratification. Of course, now we see the culmination of those efforts pay off. And I wonder what, I don't have an answer, but it's just a big question that's always sticking in my craw, which is, how did they do it? What does it have to do with perhaps their followers, their pedagogy, the fears that they imbued to those followers, the hopes, aspirations? I don't know, but there might be something to learn from that.
I'll send out one of Sandra's articles, which points to the Powell Memorandum and the road home from Mount Pelerin and exactly how that was laid out, Roger. It's heartbreaking to look how effective it was and how long-term it was and how many hundreds of millions of dollars were invested in getting us in this mess we're in right now. Sandra, your last comment there?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to point to, the fact that was very similar to the neoliberal strategy, and they're aligned, I think, and it's deliberate. Whereas progressives have so many causes and have been so unable to come together and agree to even move these ideas, progressive ideas forward, that there's just no consistency about it.
Yep.
And so it's very problematic. And that's what coming to a new economics, a new framework, a new way of thinking about things, that's why that's so important.
Yep. And if you haven't seen Kurt Anderson's new book, Evil Geniuses,
Great.
Take a look.
Yeah, great book.
Also, Charlie, you can say goodbye. And it's 2:00. We got to shut. We'll keep it open, but I know people have to take off at 2:00 for the next meeting. Charlie, your last comment?
I'm just going to say this massive disruption that COVID has given us an ability to see that drastic change is possible. And, certainly in education, and new approaches to resilience and preparedness. I think people are unfrozen and ready.
Mm-hmm.
Let's hope.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stick around, but I know people have to go at 2:00, but I'm still here.
Thank you for hosting this.
Thank you, Jim.
This was awesome.
Appreciate it very much. Take care, everyone.
Okay.
I think this has been a great conversation.
Thanks, Ed. It's so great you could join us. Terrific. And I'm going to get out to California again to visit yet.
Okay, good.
I canceled 2 trips this year already to California. But by the way, for those of you who are still here, don't stick around for me, but I thought about the question that I asked people about that we might talk about, which is, what's the most important issue you're working on? And what are you doing about it? For me, it's clearly climate change. And what I'm come up with is that the most important thing I can do is probably either send my money or myself to Georgia in the next, from December 26th to January 5th, to get the vote going the way we need it to go, to make things a lot more effective for us the next 4 years or so. I don't know how that election's going, but I'm just feeling that is probably the best way I could spend a couple of weeks right now. And then I'll go back to the regular stuff.
I think I agree, Jim. There's power in transforming the Senate, certainly. It may not be enough. If I were to say what my issue is, it's really about system transformation and how we bring that about.
Yeah.
And not from the top down, but more of the bottom up kind of approach to it.
So James, will you post the chat also when we post the video?
Absolutely. And Sandra, if I could ask a favor.
James, if you would take out the comment about my dean.
I will do. I will do.
I didn't
Please
see
do not include that.
Wait, I'm writing that down to make sure I get it.
Yeah.
Sandra, could you, the last article that was discussed that I think you sent to Professor Stoner concerning how the Republicans did this transformation, is that something that you have at the top of your head to?
I can send it to, Jim's already got it, but I can.
Or just a link or name of it and put that in the chat, that would be.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one you're referring to because I've written several, but I mean, if you send me your email, my email is waddock@bc.edu.
Yep.
If you send me your email, I'll send you a couple of articles that relate to.
I will happily do that. Thank you very much.
So Ed, it's great to see you again.
Great seeing you.
All right, Jim, I'm going to go. Thank you so much. This was so fun.
You too.
Thank you. Thank you,
Hi, Charlie. Nice to meet you finally. I've never actually met you in person. I've seen your name many times.
So Ed, I think we probably ought to book a Zoom call since I'm not physically able to get out there in the near future. And they'll pass in the long past future. I had concerts in San Francisco and San Diego for that trip with you also. Doggone.
One thing that we should have talked about a little more that I keep coming back to, and that is what working with Peter has done for me, which is to give me a direct sort of daily link to the next two generations, because Peter has a 26-year-old and a 22-year-old daughter that are both sort of entered this new world. And so I get the feeling that they already think differently systemically, and that is the great hope, that some of the reforms which we're thinking of making at our level, us old timers, are going to be a little bit easier, because I think the kids are more I thou. They're more ready to be I thou, and so they may change things while we're not even paying attention. They may not go to business school in the first place, for example, and be changing from other venues. So I'm more and more curious to be paying close attention to those next couple generations. And in this seminar that you just created, it was the young members of the group that had by far the most interesting comments, I thought.
I don't know about system change too much, but my gut kind of tells me that we may be as we make the changes we seem to be making in business schools, we may be attracting students to the business school that wouldn't go before. And we may be, I don't know what we're going to do with the students who want to go to the old kind of business school.
Yeah.
What will happen with them? But I think we're going to get a bunch of people who very rightfully chose not to go to business school because of what we were doing, and now could be attracted to what we could be doing.
Well, one of the first things we might have to change is the word business. You know, when some of the Asian countries call them schools of leadership, or did initially, and somehow leadership or something broader would be more appropriate to what we're claiming we're now trying to do.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, James. I guess we should say goodbye, and Ed and I'll do a one-on-one later on, I think, real soon. Thanks so much for joining us, Ed. Thanks, James.
I really appreciated your effort, and you created a time slot that I could participate in.
Great. I remember your schedule. Okay. Bye-bye, folks. Thanks so much.
Another such dialogue, I'll be on board.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Great to meet you. Bye.
Bye-bye.